Hi, everyone, and welcome to the iSpring Solutions webinar series, where every week we talk about e-learning trends, share iSpring tips and tricks, and cover clients' cases. My name is Alice, and I will be the moderator for today's session. And today we are going to talk about e-learning strategy for the workplace. And to cover this very important topic, we've invited an experienced and a passionate professional, Ravina Bhatia, a director and chief learning officer at Learning Tribe. Hi, Ravina. How are you today?
Hi, Alice. I'm great. And you?
I'm good as well. We also have Meher Arora. She will be helping Ravina with the presentation.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, Meher. How are you?
Very well, Alice. How are you doing today?
I am well as well. Thank you.
And while Meher starts to share her screen, I'd love to start by telling you about a Facebook page that I love. It's called View from My Window, and it was created during the initial coronavirus lockdown last year. And it was a way to connect people from all over the world. And all they did was share their view from their window, from their house. And it wasn't like going out and doing a scenic view, but just simply the view that they see every day. So while we wait for everyone to join us, if you're near a window, take a photo and share with us your view, and also share your city and country. So I'm beaming to you from Sydney, Australia, and that's the view from the window on my left today. Let's hear. I'd love to see, where is everyone joining us from? And if you can't take a photo, just tell us, where are you joining? Where's the city and country you're joining us from today? I can see we've got quite the forum. We're 19 people from Canberra, Brisbane, Sydney. Excellent. Welcome. Love it. Hi, Emma, Nikki, Judy. So from all of Australia. Excellent. New Zealand, Erin. Welcome. Wait for a couple of more to come in before we move on. Loving it. Lake Macquarie, beautiful place. Okay. With that, let's get started. And yes, there was an earthquake this morning. Judy, did you feel that? I believe it was felt in both Victoria and Canberra. I'll let Judy tell us. Okay, so let's jump right into it. And I'd like to begin. Mayor, if you could move to the next slide. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners on the land on which we meet today. I would also like to pay my respects to elders past and present. Welcome to our session, e-learning strategy for the workplace. Before we get started, we can't see the screen moving yet. So let's get some introductions out of the way. And if we could just move to the introductions screen. As you already know, I am a learning and design leader, a keen strategist, and a passionate learning practitioner with over 21 years of global experience in learning and development, organization design, and talent development. I love helping organizations and teams transform learning and have experience in L&D strategic assessments and evaluation of functional and digital maturity of L&D teams. I love working with organizations in the strategy, design, and execution of commercially savvy, best-in-class learning transformation and performance solution. I'm also joined by Meher, who is not only our producer for the day, she is an integral part of my tribe at Learning Tribe. And she has helped me put this webinar together for all of us today. So, in today's session, what we'll be doing is we will focus on 3 key aspects of creating an e-learning strategy. The way I like to break it down is the why, the what, and the how. Now, for the first 35 to 40 minutes, we will talk about each of these. Firstly, why do you need an e learning strategy? What should be in your strategy? And how to evaluate if it's impactful. We'll answer questions along the way and also leave 10 minutes at the end for any additional questions. As we go along, please feel free to use the chat. Like Alice pointed out, we love the interaction. This is a great forum for all of us as professionals to connect. And we're hoping to see a lot of interaction. I can see there's already some interaction happening. Let's keep that going. Don't wait to be invited. So let's get started with the first and the most obvious, which is the why. And there's no better way to do it than by looking at some numbers. So, according to the International Data Corporation, we'll be spending $7.4 trillion globally on technology for digital transformation by 2022. But the bigger picture in our businesses, in our industry right now, is the skills issue, which I'm sure you've all heard about because we've been all hearing about it. And the World Economic Forum telling us that 54% of our employees will need significant upskilling, especially in the digital space. So, on one hand, you've got these $7.4 trillion being spent on digital transformation. And on the other hand, you've got about half of our population who needs that upskilling in this space. According to Accenture, only 22% of organizations will actually see a return on their investment in digital transformation projects. And when I saw the numbers, I can tell you I did not want to calculate what that meant. What is that 22% to $7.4 trillion? And the fact that only that much of it will be realized. Clearly, this screams for attention and for L&D to contribute to these goals around digital transformation. Now, the term e-learning certainly isn't novel for any one of us. So I'd like for us to take a moment and define this term today so we can all get onto the same page about what are we talking about when we say e-learning. So if you could use the chat panel and share with us, what is e-learning? I'd love to hear from you. So use the chat panel and tell us what, according to you, is e-learning. Let's take a couple of seconds to start seeing our responses coming in. Hi, James, joining us from Melbourne, learning online. Excellent. Online, not classroom, loving it. What else? What is e-learning? What comes to mind when I say that word? Any learning that uses the internet, convenience. Thanks, Erin. Absolutely. Independent learning. Thanks, Emma. And we know that e-learning is short for electronic learning, so very similar to what you've already shared over here. And it refers to learning that is, like you rightly said, it could be online, and it's usually delivered, or it is delivered through digital resources. I run an industry association for, so there is currently no physical learning available. So I'm writing an Australian online learning session. Excellent. Learning that uses technology, even stuff like VR, absolutely. And Suzanne, self-paced learning, accessing digital platforms. So there's clearly, you can see there's a huge range of responses that we're getting here. So I've seen that you've started to give us examples. If we could continue on that train, which is share examples of digital learning in the chat panel that you see. So we've talked about platforms, we've talked about stuff like VR, includes social digital collaboration platforms, absolutely. Learning online, rapid learning, self-paced, yeah, absolutely. Emerging and current technologies, Suzanne, to learn and different ways of learning for learners, yep. Excellent. So in recent times, what I'd like to bring your attention to the fact is that e-learning is actually being referred to as digital learning, which is a more all-encompassing term. And it reflects a wider range of learning solutions than the term e-learning. So let's start using this term, which is digital learning, throughout this webinar, and consider how digital learning is redefining the way learners engage and companies thrive. So digital learning obviously represents the entire gamut of learning that leverages technology. to reach people in different places and at different times to achieve learning objectives. So, with that, you should be able to. What I'm going to do is I'm going to launch a poll, and I'd love for you to tell me which of these learning mediums do you use. So give me a second so I can launch the poll. You should be able to select multiple responses if this works, as it should. Tell us which of these digital learning mediums you use. I can see we've got a lot of online courses being selected. I can start to see videos, webinars. So you should be able to select multiple responses. I'm waiting for everyone to respond before I actually share the output of that with you. And once you responded to the poll, I'd also love to hear, are there other digital mediums that you commonly use in your organization, not just the ones that you've heard of, but that that you commonly use? So I can see the maximum responses are for online courses. That's 69%. And closely followed by videos and webinars like the one that we're on today. And we've also got online collaboration platforms. Excellent. So let's go back to the chat. Sharon, I use all of them, but we can okay, right. So it looks like we can only select one. This is a new on like a platform for me for webinars. So thanks for letting me know. Videos and webinars, use all of them. Excellent. And that's great. I'm loving this whole all of them because that tells us about the variety of learning being used. So digital learning obviously includes a wide range of tools and strategies: e-learning, virtual instructor-led training or webinars, blended learning, social learning, micro-learning, and other technology-enabled learning. So we've been asking people to tell us about the digital mediums used in their team and the organization. So this poll that you just responded to right now will help us with those responses. We commonly see that online courses are the most popular, and some of the other ones which support collaboration and social ones are probably still picking up pace. And this compares with the other stats that we've seen in the past. Driven by the COVID-19 pandemic, the digital transformation has prompted organizations around the world to leverage or further accelerate digital learning into their learning strategy. So, what is a digital learning strategy? So we're obviously quite familiar with what is digital learning. And so what is a digital learning strategy, and how is that different to your L&D strategy or your learning and development organizational strategy? A digital learning strategy is a deliberate and well thought out approach that determines the way you would like to use digital learning in its various forms across your organization to support the execution of your business and your L&D strategy. It considers the use of various types of digital assets like the ones that you shared with us: videos, online courses, blogs, podcasts, social collaboration platforms, even your LMS or your learning management system or your LXPs, to ensure that the organization keeps up with, one, the demands of the workplace, and also the way learners in your organization like to learn. It isn't your organizational L&D strategy, but it is a part of it. And it isn't how you design or a list of online e-learning programs you're going to create during the year. Your digital learning strategy, however, will drive these. So that begs the question, why do we need a digital learning strategy? A sound digital learning strategy will help your organization plan the digital initiatives based on the needs of your workplace and preferences of your learners. We know people learn best when they can choose the time, the place, and even the pace of it. And learning with on-demand micro-learning, enjoying professional flexibility, building on professional and personal growth via continuous learning, and receiving innovative learning avenues will help achieve that in a manner that is suited to your audiences, to your employees. A digital strategy will help you drive alignment. Now, once you've defined your strategic direction and where you're going with your digital strategy, you can get different teams moving together to achieve success. Your strategy serves as the vehicle for answering the question, how can we better align all of our resources to maximize our strategic success? It increases efficiency and productivity because you're making available the right tools in the right measure and in the most suitable platforms. A carefully designed strategy will help you determine the infrastructure and technology needed by your organization and your team to encourage that self directed workplace or learning that we just talked about with fairly planned development opportunities. It also defines your organization's view of success and prioritizes the activities that will make your digital learning vision your reality. In one of my recent roles, when I started out with the digital transformation learning strategy and the project, what I found was really one of the challenges was how do I prioritize everything that I need to do? There's obviously a lot that I needed to achieve, but in what order? And this is where the strategy came into place. It will help your people, which is your L&D team, know what they should be working on and what they should be working on first. Without that being clearly defined and articulated, you may find that your priority initiatives, the ones that are going to drive the highest success, are actually being given secondary treatment. If your leadership team has trouble saying no to new ideas or potential initiatives, that's again where a strategy will be helpful, because remember, your strategy will have already prioritized the activities necessary for success. And these priorities make it easier to say no to distracting initiatives or to reprioritize. And finally, many L&D leaders walk around with a virtual strategy locked in their heads, knowing where their organization or team needs to be and the key activities that will get it there. Unfortunately, if the strategy is not on paper and hasn't been communicated thoroughly, very few people are going to be acting on it. So when your team, your leaders, or even your vendors you work with know where you're going, you allow even greater opportunities for people to help you maximize your success in getting there. Once you recognize the need to plan, you have now become the role of being the catalyst for facilitating the buy-in and commitment of your leadership team and the rest of your organization. And I found that very few executives truly understood their role in how to maximize their role. And that's again where the strategy played a huge role. This session today is focused on you and the vital role you play in facilitating strategy throughout your organization. So let's get into it. So this now brings us to the next section, which is what should be in your strategy. So, we know it's important. So therefore, one, how do we build one and what should be in it? Now, we discussed earlier that this is not an organizational L&D strategy. If you're yet to build your L&D strategy, I would recommend using the L&D strategy builder process laid out by Learning Uncut. If you would like to learn more about this process, you can visit the website using the link that Meher is going to pop into the chat for us. So typically, you will create your digital learning strategy when you create your L&D strategy. However, the process that I'm going to talk to you about next can help you evolve your existing L&D strategy. So you can use it if you have an existing L&D strategy or if you're starting from scratch, or to help you reassess your existing digital learning strategy or enhance it. So you've got a couple of options there. Most importantly, this process will help set you up for a digital evolution. Now, with that brings us to the process. And I'll just note there is a slight lag in sharing screen, so I'm going to pause till we get to the next section. We're on the process. I'm going to pause. Excellent. Thanks, Meher. And you can see there are 4 key steps we've outlined to create an impactful and sustainable digital learning strategy: consult, benchmark, design, and adjust. Now, you start out with the consult phase. We use a human-centered design approach to talk to as many people as we can. We involve business teams, managers, and end users in the design process to uncover performance barriers and gaps, understand learner habits, availabilities, new trends, and existing opportunities before using new technologies or tools. Speak with your divisional and business leaders, stakeholders, externals from within L&D, and externals from the industry. Attend forums such as these, both locally and globally, where you can find out one, what is the digital learning status quo? What does it look like today? And finally, needs and preferences now and likely in the future. So, from what I've just shared with you, can you use the chat panel and share with us? Are there other stakeholders that it is important for you to speak with? Or who are some of the stakeholders that you commonly speak with to in your consult phase to define or reach to where you want to be with your digital learning strategy? Thanks, Abhishek. That's using simulators is excellent. Internal and cluster stakeholders, members, suppliers, potential trainees, yeah. SMEs, absolutely. All of these are people that you must speak with. What else? Who else do you think we should speak with? Leadership levels of influence, absolutely. Getting leadership buy-in. Senior management, absolutely. Thank you for those responses. That is correct. It is important for you to be able to speak with as many people as you can. So you've got the right people with you in the journey. And that was that has always been one of our biggest challenges as L&D professionals to take people along, whether it's a new strategy, a new tool, or a completely new digital initiative that we're taking forward. So now that you've spoken with all the key stakeholder groups, you take all of the insights, the qualitative and the quantitative research that you've captured at the consult phase, and you take it into the benchmark phase. And in the benchmark phase, there are three key answers you need. Where are you currently at? Where do you want to be? And what's that gap? To find out how effective your current digital learning landscape is, you can leverage existing digital maturity assessments that are tailored especially for learning. One of the ones that I've used is the Digital Learning Maturity Diagnostic by Cross Knowledge. Meher will pop the link into the chat window for you. While there are, of course, others that you can leverage, in my experience, this one is a short and a credible assessment that is very easy for you to complete by yourself or with your team. I would personally recommend doing this with your team or with a co-working group working on the digital strategy. That's what I've done in the past. Again, it helps bring in different perspectives to what the perception around your digital strategy is. Abhishek, you also talked about sponsors and actual users, consulting with them. 100%, absolutely. Getting people along in the journey with us. So now that you know where you want to be, you get to designing your strategy. And this is with the intent to bridge that gap you've identified and get to where you want to be. We'll talk in more detail about what are the components of a digital learning strategy. Something very important for us to consider, that is, this activity isn't completed by ourselves. We don't do this by ourselves. All the stakeholders that we talked about earlier, all those examples, the SMEs, sponsors and actual users, suppliers where possible, internal and cluster stakeholders, co-design with them, because the best strategies are co-designed with our stakeholder group. One way to do this is to take all your findings and your benchmarking into a workshop and to co-design your digital learning strategy in a workshop setting. By way of example, when we were in the office, I typically run this activity in person with stakeholder groups using post-its and whiteboards. More recently, we have been collaborating using our trusty friend Zoom, but also combining it with virtual whiteboards, post-its, and sometimes just Google Docs. Something to consider is that you might not be able to get all your stakeholders at the same time, and especially leaders who may not have the time to attend these collaborative sessions. You may first run the session with a group of stakeholders and then also use one-on-one time with leaders to glean their inputs. Once you've designed your strategy, you need to implement your strategy as per the timelines. Communicate it to everyone so people know it exists. Support ground up approaches and the socialization or sharing of learning in various forms. Incorporate learning analytics and agile design to evaluate progress and make necessary adjustments to the strategy. Conduct regular learning technology audits to streamline experiences, close gaps, and incorporate your any updates. Once you've designed your strategy, you also need to implement it as per the timelines you might have defined. Communicate it to everyone so people know it exists and adjust it based on the feedback that you get. I've just shared an entire process with you. I'd like to pause here to check, do you have any initial reactions or questions? You can use the emoticons or the reactions at the bottom of the chat panel to tell us how you're feeling about the process we just saw. And have you used a process similar to this in the past? So tell us, how do you feel about that strategy? And have you used a process similar to this in the past? So if we could flick to the next screen, Meher, so we could see all the... Excellent, thank you. All right, waiting for some reactions. You can use the emoticons or simply type in how you're feeling. How do you feel about this process that we've just shared with you? You get a thumbs up. Thanks, Judy. Any other thoughts? Yes, it is the same strategy to building a website. Quite right. I think this is the model that I use for all projects. Thanks, Nikki. Who else has used a process similar to this? Thanks, Nicole. Looks like you like it. When I first heard of this process and started to use it, I guess the emoticon I'd use was curious. I was curious and I wanted to find out more. Yes, learned about this process in uni in my bachelor and master's. We use this process as well in my organization. Excellent. So clearly, a lot of us have used a similar process to this in the past. So we now know how to build a strategy. It leads us to the obvious question of what should be in it? What are the components of a digital learning strategy? So a lot of you have used this process in the past and you've studied about it, used it in your teams, initiatives, and organizations. Tell me, what are the components that are part of your digital learning strategy or other strategies that you have seen? What are the components of a digital learning strategy? Okay, I'll wait a couple of seconds. I know it takes a couple of seconds for all the responses to start coming through. What are typically the components of a digital learning strategy that you've seen, that you have in your organization, that you've looked at? Selection of technology platforms wanting to use. Perfect. Yep, absolutely. What else? The goals of your digital learning strategy, current skill set and new requirements. Great. Types of users. Yep. And that's usually something that you would, the types of users you'll gather during your consult phase, which is what are the different types of users you've got in your organization and what their personas might look like. It's a good practice. We tend to use a lot of head city or human-centered design practices in the consult phase. So to build a persona of the type of learners that you have in your organization. And you might have already have this as part of your organizational learning strategy. Or this might be something you do at this point. Cost and return on investment and measures to determine success. Excellent. There's some great inputs here about, what are the different components. So here is a list that we have defined. And these are what we think are the 7 core components of a digital learning strategy. Your strategy may have a combination of these and more. However, these are what we consider core and have proven with use over time to help us design a strategy that is coherent and complete. We will go through each one of them next. So I can see a couple of more inputs came in: measures to determine success, map business need with perceived value and map content. Absolutely, Abhishek. A communication and promotional rollout to promote it. So let's talk about all of these components, and please keep sharing your thoughts, or if you have questions about each of these components as we talk about them, um, please go ahead and put them into the chat window. Now, start by defining common design principles and strategy that will help you achieve organizational goals and objectives. And you'll do this by leveraging the insights from the consultation phase to identify performance needs and befitting approaches tailored to your audiences. Agree on your design methodology. Is it going to be agile? Is it going to be waterfall or a combination of both? Once again, this should be driven by the ways of working that already exist across your organization. Leverage existing processes that help you swim with the tide instead of creating new ones if you can. A couple of examples of what this might look like in terms of design strategy or principles. If you work in a highly regulated environment and risk is a key pillar of your organizational strategy, one of your design principles is likely to be to track all learning, formal, informal, or experiences. If you have core products that different teams in your organization need to be across, you might use the principle of build once for multiple audiences. It's important to extend the definition of design here. Design principles extend to all performance and learning experience design, and not just traditional content development. It refers to the design of experiences to support organizational performance needs, and hence we need to agree on common principles and expectations with key business stakeholders and our end users. Let's share. What are the design principles and strategies that you use in your team or organization? What are some of your best practices in this space? Giving you a couple of examples, I used to work in a highly regulated environment. So, yes, we did build ones for multiple audiences. Everything that we built had to be tracked, whether it was through unique visitor visits on a portal side or it was through LMS based tracking as well. So, what are some of the design principles that you use in your organization? Let's take a couple of seconds to see our responses coming in. Scalable, excellent, not just a one-off use, 100%, Anna, again. Less is more. Yeah, and that's a really great one. There's, a lot of us tend to just drop content and move on. And the less is more approach means, getting more, the 80-20 rule. We do the same, and LMS and BMC weekly tracking. So there's a lot of tracking. Okay. Any other unique principles that you would like to share with us? Visual design is a really integral part of the way that we design. And again, think of design of experiences, not just learning or content development. So now that we've talked about some of the principles that communicate, and Anna, you're talking about using existing tools such as SharePoints. That actually brings us to a great topic, which is digital mediums. So you've defined the strategy, the principles based on which you'll design. What are the mediums that you will leverage as a part of your strategy? And these are determined by three key factors. And you'll see there's a lot of three points here, three questions to ask yourself. Where are you going in your digital journey? Where are you currently? What's the digital maturity which you outline in your benchmark phase? What is the digital maturity of your team and your organization? What mediums are easily accessible and consumable by your learners? You don't want to bring in mediums that your learners can't access easily. What flexibility can you offer in choosing devices, mediums, time, and location? What are the existing mediums, like you rightly pointed out, Anna, that you can leverage before introducing new mediums? Plan inclusion of new mediums. So while, yes, you've got the existing mediums that you can leverage before you introduce new ones, and when you do introduce new ones, do it in horizons. What will you leverage immediately? What will come next, and so on? You don't want to implement a whole lot of new mediums altogether. Allow your audiences time to use embed and enjoy the mediums, and importantly, provide your feedback that you can take into future implementation. Earlier in the session, we looked at some of the more common mediums used by us. Find out which of those are preferred by your audiences. Run polls and focus groups to improve the way you use these mediums. This is again something that we do quite often, which is we'd introduce something new and then ask and poll people, or put them together in focus groups. We had preferences polls that we would run every year to see how people, when they were exposed to new mediums, how their preferences were changing and what they were seeing happening in the world around them as well. We've got the 70-20-10 principle, Nikki. Absolutely. A great principle to use as a part of your strategy. So that gets us to the technology and infrastructure. Your technology and infrastructure should be determined by one key question. What is the learning ecosystem that you need? Not the one that you want or you desire, but the one that you need to create in your organization to achieve your goals. And this in turn leads you to two other questions. So the technology and infra that you need as an organization, as an L&D team to implement your digital learning strategy, and also the technology and infrastructure that your learners need to access your ecosystem. What rapid authoring tool will you use? If you have selected video as a learning medium, what software or hardware do you need to implement this? Once again, you will see data-based decision making where you're using research data to inform your strategy and resulting decisions. We earlier discussed leveraging existing learning mediums before introducing new ones. The same applies here. You need to first consider completely leveraging what exists before we introduce new platforms. How many of you have a design system or are in the process of putting one together? Have you heard of the term design system? Just pop a yes or a no into the chat panel to tell us. Excellent. I see start to see responses coming. Yes, no. Okay, so a few of us do, and it seems to be new for a couple of us. So let me start by actually defining what a design system is. Design system, it's a framework and tools, and it acts as a single source of truth for all design. Kind of like a set of Lego pieces that you need to assemble in a logical manner to create a coherent output. So it brings together different elements that are part of your design to create learning experiences. It's not a deliverable by itself, but a system that helps you produce deliverables. So think of your tone of voice that you want to use in all of your learning experiences, the branding, the style guide, things like the folder structure, the naming conventions, templates, fonts, imagery that you want to use that might be guided in an overarching, and it's usually guided in an overarching manner by your organizational design elements, but the way these come together to create learning experiences. And this evolves along with the maturity of your team and your organization. So this topic could be an entire webinar by itself. Here's a link that you can access that we're going to pop into the chat. It contains a publicly available design system for the Australian government. So if you want to see what a design system looks like, here's quite a comprehensive one for you to look at. There's another one that is quite comprehensive, which is by Service NSW. So these are the two I would recommend looking at. And in one of my most recent roles, the implementation of a design system helped us solve a problem in the L&D team, and which was, what should our experiences that our team creates look like? It actually had measurable results in the form of a shift in the NPS scores that we collect. And we saw a change in the NPS scores when we started to implement and use this design system. So your design system is also a core component of your learning digital strategy. Finally, like everything else, an evaluation strategy is determined by your organizational strategy. So defining what will you evaluate, how will you evaluate, and when will you evaluate? These are some of the key questions to respond to. We will talk about this a little bit more in our last section, which is focused on how to measure if our strategy works. So, you have a strategy, you've defined the infrastructure and tech, but you need to implement your strategy. You need the right resourcing in your team. What that means is you'll need to define the skill sets, the team structure, and the role mix. By way of example, let's go back to that videos example. You've identified that you would like to use videos as a medium. You've identified you want to use what's the infrastructure and technology you need, so the hardware and the software you'll need. You now need to define the skill sets you need in your team to implement that. So you're likely to need video editing. You're likely to need script writing. So if there's software that you identified for videos, you're not likely to need the skill sets to use those software, use those hardware. If you want animated videos, you either need animation skills in your team, or you need to bring in someone who knows how to use a rapid authoring tool for animation those that exist these days. So essentially, you also need to consider then how will you structure your team for efficiency and effectiveness? What is the role mix? Is this a short term or a long term need? This will determine if you need contractors or permanent staff in your team. As you can see, without considering all of these elements, implementing your strategy is likely to be a challenge. And then you split your implementation into horizons. And when we talk about splitting our implementation into horizons or timelines, it's across all the elements, whether it is for skill sets, so splitting up the timelines to bring in new skill sets across those horizons, splitting up the timelines to implement new technology and infrastructure into horizons. A digital learning strategy doesn't mean we do it all together, all at once, and bring all of these components to life all together. It is this component of horizons or timelines which will give you the time to implement, test, and adjust your strategy. Create horizons for implementation and spread them out into realistic short, medium, and long term goals. And these goals will differ and will depend on where you in the implementation of your strategy. We've talked a fair bit about what are the different components of your strategy. What I'd like to share with you is an example of a digital learning strategy on our page that I co created for an organization. This strategy on a page is not the complete strategy. It is exactly what I just said, strategy on a page. So it includes all of the integral elements of the digital learning strategy. Some of the core components, such as horizons and stream structure, were defined as a result of the strategy that you see right now on your page, on your screen. And this was the one pager we used to communicate it to everyone and have conversations with stakeholders. This is a 5-year strategy, and this is for a progressive outlook organization where being digital is a high priority. And that's how all of these different parts were brought together. So what you will see is we've defined not just the platform, the systems, but also what are we looking to achieve as a result of it. So an example of that is we wanted to use social learning and collaborative learning as well as user-generated content. So we wanted to implement a social community platform. Similarly, we wanted to implement competency-based assessments and frameworks, which is why we needed a competency management system. So this is a really integral part of the way that you would design your digital learning strategy. We talked a fair bit about building a robust strategy. Here are some common errors to watch out for and avoid. I'll start with the most common one. I briefly referred to this while just showing you that example strategy right now. If you've heard of technological determinism, in the context of learning, simply put, it is letting technology determine your learning, what your learning should look like, and taking a technology led approach. And a lot of us can fall into that trap. The number of times I've heard we're implementing an LXP, we don't know what we can do with it, is an example of that. This is the opposite of what we should be doing. Our strategy and requirements should determine the technology that we need. Adopting a top down or content led approach at the cost of your learners. Thinking in short term, siloed, and very role specific ways that is likely not conducive for future development. Your strategy should be scalable and enduring and should only require maybe an annual refresh. lack of consult with your users, and we talked about not building it by ourselves. So you've got to consult with your users, the industry, your stakeholder groups, your leadership. And not doing that can lead you to creating a beautiful white elephant that everyone admires but isn't of any use. Deprioritizing measurement of learning use and impact, and therefore not adjusting and evolving your strategy for it to be the same year on year. Which of these common errors have you personally experienced or seen in other organizations? For me, the most common one was technological determinism, which is letting technology determine what your strategy and what your learning should look like. And costs a small fortune, white elephant, absolutely. No evaluation strategy, and then move on to the next shiny thing that comes up. Absolutely, completely agree, Nikki. The next shiny thing, what's fun? And the number of conversations we've had where let's try this and why we're trying it, we don't know. Let's try VR or let's try augmented reality. To what extent? What else? Are there any others that you've commonly experienced or seen in other organizations? Okay, so moving on, this brings us to the next section, which is evaluation and how to evaluate if what we've created is impactful or effective. We touched on evaluation early in the session, both when we discussed the core components of a digital strategy and also when we discussed common pitfalls. Given its existence in both these categories, the case for the importance of evaluating strategy is made. And we also saw that come through in that. Nikki just shared with us no evaluation strategy and then moving to the next shiny thing. Your digital learning strategy needs to facilitate new systems, processes, products, markets, innovations, regulatory compliance, continuous improvements, performance, and the list goes on. It's important that we check if the learning's ecosystem is thriving and allowing people in your organization to connect, collaborate, and share knowledge effectively. And we cannot do this if we don't measure if it is working and adjust it. Here are some more numbers for you. Again, love these numbers. In an article early in 2021, Laura Overton shared a statistic about e-learning projects, and that 60% of them failed. Now, what's interesting is that 60% of them failed, but that also meant that 40% of them succeeded, which she points out in her article. And what I'd love to bring your attention to is we need to find out what makes these projects succeed, these 40% projects. So why do you think it's important for us to find out why do these projects succeed? In order for L&D to reiterate its contribution in delivering business results, a systematic and robust measurement that collects comprehensive data and goes beyond learner attendance and user satisfaction surveys is really important. What are some of the evaluation metrics that you use in your organization to evaluate success of your ecosystem or of digital initiatives? So, what are some of the evaluation metrics that you use in your organization to measure your successes? Surveys, questionnaires, excellent. What else? I'd love to hear from you. I know this is one of the more commonly ignored aspects of learning and learning strategy. QA data, excellent. There's business data coming in, Anna. Thank you. Voice of the customer, so client feedback. Virtual meeting is a follow-up after the online learning training. So that's giving you qualitative data from users. Thanks, Natalie. Excellent. So there's a couple of examples that we've seen. What we perceive as success varies across the L&D value spectrum that you see on the screen right now. And it's going to probably, yep, now you can see it on the screen. More often than not, we see measurement of the parameters on the left of the screen as opposed to the measurements on the right, where there is business value. The measures that matter. Those are the ones. This is because learning value is largely in our control, while business value is impacted by a number of variables. So measuring business value scares us because we talk about the number of variables that go into generating business value, or when we talk about ROI. This model by Laura Overton is discussed in Laura Overton's article, which we brought up earlier, which says start with the end in mind. So find out the metrics that matter to your business and then work backwards to other metrics that will help achieve these key business metrics. One of the ways I have personally worked with the business is by leveraging the spectrum that you see on the screen. And I worked with them and collaborated and co-designed an evaluation framework by using this metric and then these metrics and identifying the measures that matter to our organization with them. And these metrics ranged across the spectrum that you see. They helped us to secure support and budgets in order for L&D to reiterate its contribution in delivering business results and giving us a co-design and agreed upon systematic and robust measurement that gave us comprehensive data and went beyond learner attendance and user satisfaction surveys. It helped us gather reliable evidence and intelligence. So, investing in digital is not synonymous with enhancing learning reach, access, and application. It requires regular scrutiny to gather credible input to make informed investments and decisions in future. To help us realign and adapt, so as L&D leaders needing to critically review the performance of employed learning platforms to measure the ROI, the business strategy alignment, or simply asking users if it worked for them. Our learning value metrics are also important because if there's no learning transfer or retention, then clearly something needs to be adjusted or updated. So we do need to consider a range of metrics to fully understand if what we put into place, our strategy, our infrastructure is working. Meher will pop a link to Laura's article into the chat panel so you can go through it later. But I'd like to pause over here to check if you have questions or comments about what we have just discussed. I'll pause for a couple of seconds before we move on. Okay, so that brings us to the last part of the session, and we're 5 minutes to time, 6 minutes to time. I'd like to use the last part of this session to chat and interact. We've traversed through 3 key elements of a digital learning strategy in our session today. We started with why do we need a digital strategy, where we were introduced to the fact that e-learning has now been relabeled as digital learning in order for it to be all encompassing in today's context. And we discussed its importance in today's context as well. In the next section, we talked about 3 key areas: the process, the components, and common errors that will help you shape your strategy. And finally, and importantly, we briefly touched on how will you know it's working. Which of these sections or topic was most valuable to you? Please share with us in the chat window. And also, what are you going to do next with your digital learning strategy? What's the immediate next step that you're going to take? The review of the strategy. Thanks, Judy. I think pull all that stuff we already have into some kind of map or ecosystem. Yeah. So you've got it, written down somewhere and documented, and then you can execute to it. Review our content to ensure it aligns. Evaluation value system. All sections promoted within other state entities. Awesome. That's great, Suzanne. I'm glad it was of value to you. Any other thoughts? So you're now all connected to each other who are all attending this workshop today, and to us and to me. Earlier in this year, I attended a workshop for learning leaders where someone said, "You know that you're in a community of practice when your practice changes." So, if you would like to see your practice evolve, reach out to everyone here, grow your learning community. I'm reminded of that phrase each time I'm able to interact and learn in a forum such as this. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn by phone or email. Meher will also pop the link to the Link Learning Tribe LinkedIn page so you can join us for other discussions such as this. I will stick around for another a couple of minutes so that you can ask me any questions in the chat. Yeah, a career change is calling. Thanks, Suzanne. Nikki, thanks for the links, the design system. Thank you. Grid Forum, thank you. Suzanne, thank you for joining us today. Thank you, Judy. We appreciate you spending your time with us. Please feel free to ask any questions, or you can use those links to reach out to us later. I'm glad you were able to get a lot away from, capture a lot away from this, Natalie. Thank you, Jenny and Anna. I'm glad that gives you a starting point, Sharon. Thanks, Anne Marie. Okay.
Yeah, well, I think yes, we should. It's time to wrap up our session, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Next.
Thank you, ladies, for your presentation. Thank you, Ravina, for sharing your experience with our audience. Um, Thank you, guys, for coming and spending this valuable hour with us. Okay, so thank you again, guys, and see you at the next webinar.
See you, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Bye bye. Have a lovely rest of the day.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.